seminar on artificial intelligence tools for small businesses. This is the first, as far as I'm aware, seminar on artificial intelligence tools in this part of the country from SCORE. And I guarantee you it's not going to be the last. There are a lot of exciting and interesting things happening. And we will be keeping you up to date as things change over time. Today, we're going to introduce you to two very useful, very accessible, very easy to use artificial intelligence tools, also known as AI tools, called ChatGPT and DALL-E 2. And we're going, ChatGPT is a text-based tool, which we'll do a demo of. I'll do a demo, and then we will show you some examples of how you can use it and how you can create the prompts. And then my partner here, Rob Stutzman, who you can see on the right, will be joining, will be demoing an image-based tool called DALL-E, doing the same sort of things, showing you the live demo, examples, and then creating the prompts. Then we're going to cover a few frequently asked questions, tell you where you can go for tools and other next steps, and then we'll open it up for additional Q&A. So in addition to myself, I am a SCORE mentor based in Rhode Island, and Rob, who's a SCORE mentor, a subject matter expert based in the Boston chapter. We also have behind the scenes Georgianne Doyle, who is Wizard of Oz style, pulling all the levers and making behind the curtain, making sure that things are working. So, Georgianne, would you like to say a word to the group?
Yes, I've already had a couple people ask if we're going to have slides and recording, and yes, the slides and the recording will be emailed to everyone who registered. This is the largest program we've ever done, so please hold your questions until the end. I also need to let you know that I need you to use the chat box instead of Q&A. So please, any questions that you absolutely have to ask, do so in chat. And we'll try to keep up with everything. And at the end of the program, probably in the next day or so, we will send all of these slides for the whole program and the recording to all attendees, well, to all who registered. So if you registered, you're here shortly and then have to leave, that's okay. You will get all of it in your email through Constant Contact from our account. So with that, let's go.
All right. So again, what we like to do is help you learn about these two tools, which are not the only artificial intelligence tools out there. We'll talk about a wider variety of tools that are available later on, and show you how to use them. And hopefully by the end of this seminar, you'll have a good idea of what's there available, how they can be used, and how to use them. So we're going to actually go now to a live demo, and you'll need give me a second while I transition over to my ChatGPT, and let me just bring that up, and need a second. Thought I had it on my desktop, but I don't. So I'm going to have to bring it up again. Give me one moment. And I'm going to share my screen now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can share the ChatGPT. Okay. Can somebody let me know if you can see the ChatGPT screen?
Yes, it's there.
Okay, great, great. All right, so this is what ChatGPT looks like, and it looks pretty simple, right? It's kind of like when you go into Google, right? You just have a box here for entering information, and that's what I'm going to do. I will mention that ChatGPT, it can be used for a wide variety of purposes. You can actually see a little bit of my history off here to the left. Love poem for wife, advice to young grandchildren. If anybody knows my wife, please don't tell her that the love poem I sent her was created by an artificial intelligence app. She still thinks that I brilliantly came up with it on my own. So, but what we're going to talk about today is the use of ChatGPT for business purposes. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of how you might actually use it in business, and then we'll talk about more. So I'm going to start by asking ChatGPT to write an 800-word blog, and I'm going to assume for the moment, we're going to pretend that I have a shop where I'm selling ancient coins, and I want to do a blog this week about ancient Greek coins, because every week I come up with a new blog, and this week is going to be about Greek coins. So you can see I've typed in, write an 800-word blog about ancient Greek coins, and I'm going to hit the message. And well, that was pretty quick. Within seconds, I had a ChatGPT was writing a blog for me. Now, let's just take a look at it, get a feeling for what happened there. Came up with a new, an interesting title, Unveiling the Legacy, Ancient Greek Coins. Has an introduction, talks about historical significance, design and symbolism, cultural and artistic impact, legacy and collectability, and conclusion. So you can see this is a fairly meaty blog. We'll talk a little more about what you might do with this when we talk about specifics of working with this tool. But as you can see, within seconds, with a simple request, I was able to generate an 800-word blog. All right, let me give you another example. So let's say I was a little further back in the process. I hadn't actually started this process, or I hadn't actually come up with started my shop, but I was thinking about creating a shop, and I wanted to come up with some names. So I'm going to say, list some names for a shop specializing in collecting ancient coins. Okay, so I'm gonna fix my spelling there. List some names for a shop specializing in collecting ancient coins. So this time I'm not going to ask it for a text, I'm going to ask it for a list. Thinks about it for all of a few seconds and has come up with 20 possible names that I might have for my new shop that I'm creating. So let me give you one more idea. And I see that people are raising their hand, but please, if you have a question, please text chat with Georgianne. She's the one who's handling all requests, and because we have a large audience, we can't address questions as they come up. We'll do that at the end. So this one I got a copy and paste in here because it's a little bit longer. Write a short job description for a part-time bookkeeper for a retail shop. Must have experience with Rhode Island sales tax, income tax, and employee payroll taxes. So you'll notice here, I gave it a little more context. I told it was a part-time bookkeeper, that I was interested in having experience with these specific kinds of taxes, etc. I hit the submit button, and up comes a custom job description for specifically that person that we're looking to hire. So we wanted to give you a real sense of what it's like. I mean, it's just that easy. You go in, you have to, of course, register. That all takes about 5 minutes, not much different than you would have if you were, say, registering for any website. But now we're going to, and then you go ahead and use it just as we've described. So I'm going to go back and we'll go to the slides again. And Georgianne, you can tell me if, okay. Are you able to see that properly, Georgianne?
Yeah, there's no slide right now.
Oh, there isn't. Okay. How about that?
That's it.
All right, great. Thank you very much. All right. So, let's talk about a little more about ChatGPT and offer you some more details and explanations. So first of all, it's called chat because you chat with it, right? I mean, you really are putting in a request in normal, natural English language, and you're getting back information in natural language. It's a chat back and forth. It is a tool. It's like Google, right? I'm sure you've used Google before. It's really, in that sense, no different. By that I mean no different in the sense of you use it like you would use a tool like Google. It does two things very well, plus some other things, but the ones that for this discussion we'll focus on is that it answers your questions in an informative way, and it writes custom content and documents. In other words, what you're seeing is not just something it found on the web and copied and pasted. It actually created this content and document or document from your request. The benefits are pretty amazing. Everybody I know who've used it have told me that they are really impressed by the efficiency that they get. The number I hear often is that that saves them more than half the time, and sometimes as much as 80% of the time in creating a document. Why? Because instead of starting from a blank piece of paper, it's, say, for instance, to write that blog, you are starting from a not perfect, but a finished blog, and you're tuning it to what you want to say. The other thing, though, that's important is almost everyone I've talked to tells me that they also have an increase in quality. And the reason for that is it's almost like a collaborative situation. In other words, if you work with somebody else to create a document, someone who's knowledgeable and has a lot of information at their fingertips, the two of you are together going to create a better end result than you were if you were to do it on your own. And that's exactly what's happening here. In fact, I kind of think of this, when I think of ChatGPT, what I think of is I imagine that there's like a very fast free intern at my disposal who can go out and collect facts and write stuff up for me that I can then use in what I want to do. However, using that analogy, yeah, that is a good analogy in the sense that you must fact check, right? In other words, this tool, this intern, right, is not going to be perfect. And you should double check and make sure that what is written works. Now, if you're an expert or pretty knowledgeable in this area, that's a pretty good, it's pretty easy because you in fact know a lot and you can look at it and add your own value. If not, you may have to do a little checking to make sure that that it's correct. One of the things that you have to be, well, I'll talk about that in a second. And by the way, there are, talking about text-based AI tools, there are several other tools available, not just ChatGPT. Rob's going to talk about those later. Most of them use a freemium model. If you're not familiar with the term freemium, it's a little bit of slang. It means to use the base model is free, but if you want the more advanced models, you might have to pay a modest monthly fee. So for instance, with ChatGPT, the basic model is free. There's an advanced model that costs $20 a month. That is a little faster and a little more up to date. What doesn't it do yet very well? Well, from what I can tell, doesn't do humor very well. I have caught a couple of ChatGPT jokes and none of them impress me. It doesn't often have a lot of flair. It can be kind of bland, but that's where your voice comes in, the ability to kind of customizing it using your voice and going to in the next draft. But the other thing, and this kind of gets back to the previous point that you should be very aware of, is that it does not differentiate between fact and fiction. In fact, there's actually a term called hallucinations, right? And again, I'll go back to the analogy of that intern, right? So imagine that this intern was very smart, very capable, very well informed, but every once in a while got it wrong. And here's the thing, that when that person got it, that intern got it wrong, they were just as sure, just as certain of themselves when they were wrong as when they were right. And that is certainly true of ChatGPT, right? I'm not saying this actually would happen, but the example I've heard, for instance, is if you ask, ChatGPT who won the Super Bowl in 1961, it might tell you with great certainty who won. Well, in fact, there was no Super Bowl in 1961. It didn't exist yet. So, you have to be, that's where your value added comes in the process. All right, so what can you use this for? First draft, again, I'll emphasize that, of almost any business or personal document. So marketing and sales, it's great for blogs, for articles, for website text, if you're building a website, for product descriptions, social media, sales emails, instruction manuals, which can be fairly time consuming, and performing customer service. And by that, I mean, if you had a website that has a chat box in it, you could actually use ChatGPT possibly to answer customer questions. A couple more things it can be used for: create job descriptions. You saw me give an example, employee handbooks, HR manuals. And by the way, almost all these things are things that I know people have used this for already. Create business plan outlines. If you're building a business plan, it may not do it from scratch, the whole thing from scratch, but it could certainly help you along the way. And I've also seen it identify good target customers. You could ask it a question about, I'm selling ancient coins out of my shop based in Providence, Rhode Island. Who are the types of people who normally collect ancient coins, right? And it will tell you, to the best of its knowledge, who your best type of target customers might be. You can also use it for emails, internal communications. I mentioned customer service. It also does language translation, or if you want to take something and put it in a second language. It also writes computer code. That's not probably outside the realm of what most people on this call will be doing, but that's even an option itself. And much more. And for those of you who've been around a while and remember what the internet was like 25 years ago when we were just getting started, AI is like that right now, right? It's been less than a year that it's been in the hands of the public, right? And the opportunities to use it are just exploding. And so there's lots and lots of opportunities out there. All right, so a little bit of input on how you actually go about doing it. Those are some of the use cases. Now we'll talk about the process. And these are called, there's a term you'll want to know called prompts, right? That was when I put in that text in that box, that was a prompt, right? So you start with a general prompt, and then it helps to gradually make it more descriptive. And as you do, it will refine the results. So an example was where I said this kinds of income tax, the kinds of taxes that I wanted ChatGPT to the person to be able to handle. That would be a little more description. The more you can do that, the better the chance that the end result will be more closely aligned with what you're looking for. The more details you give it, the better it'll be able to guess what you're trying to achieve, both in context and in style. So context is the actual content. The style is the way that you write it. And then the third step, of course, as I said, edit and add your own content, expertise in writing. And finally, of course, as I said, fact check, okay? So some prompt tips. The first one is, if you can create these things called mega prompts, which are reusable. So imagine that you wanted to write sales emails, and you were going to do a dozen of those a week or something like that, right? Well, what you could do is create, say in Word or something like that, just put together a text that describes all your products, your benefits, your companies, maybe even an example of one of your best emails, and then save that, right? Save that. That becomes a mega prompt that you can use anytime that you want to do it. And then what you do is you put your request in and you drop your mega prompt in right in that text chat box right after your request. The amount of text you can put into your prompt is almost unlimited. It's thousands and thousands of words, right? So feel free to add all sorts of information, and also, of course, for your own benefit, so that you don't have to recreate it each time, save that so that you can use it over and over again anytime you want to use ChatGPT. It's not necessary. You saw that I got some very good results without doing it, but that's something that you can do that can be beneficial. Another thing you can do is, as I mentioned, is to adjust the tone. So you can add a reading level or target audience, such as with the words in a casual tone, right? Or in an informative tone. In other words, you can take your prompt, just like I wrote it, and then add those words in the end, and it will know to adjust the tone of the message as well. You can even make it, if you want to make it more personal, you can, this is sort of an interesting thing. You could add a persona, say, I want you to act as Jeff, as me, and the goal is to create a sales email about, whatever you want to write it. So in other words, it can actually take on you as a persona in writing the email. It sort of takes a step out of the process. Instead of writing it in third person, it's going to write the text in first person, and you won't have to go back and make those edits later on. Another little tip is, if you want to add, let's say if you wanted to add headlines. Now you saw in the blog there were some headlines in there, but if you want if you find that you need better headlines and subheadlines and bolding, in other words, a kind of added things that might kind of break up your text and make it easier to read, you can add the words at the end, format this in Markdown so it is easy to read. And that's how you would get that. And finally, if you want to know the sources of where it's getting its information, what you do is you use a slightly different approach. You don't go directly to ChatGPT. You go to a web browser one that uses ChatGPT. And Rob's going to explain this later on. So if this isn't absolutely clear, don't worry, he'll explain a little more later on. So you go to something like Bing, which is a web browser, and then you will access ChatGPT through it, and then you will add to your prompt, again, you'll have a prompt, cite sources with URL links. And what will happen then is you will actually get a not just the information, the response, but will also tell you where it got all its information. So if that's something that you're concerned about, you can do that. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Rob. Go ahead and go with it, Rob. He's going to explain DALL-E 2, which is a different app, AI app, but from the same company.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. And let me add my word of greetings to everybody on the call. We're so glad that you're able to make it today. I'm going to talk about DALL-E. It's another artificial intelligence model. It was developed by OpenAI, which is the same entity that created ChatGPT. OpenAI is the open source code that developers use to create different kinds of tools based on AI. So DALL-E is a variation of the GPT model. It focuses on generating images instead of text. What Jeff showed you was how you could input text to get text back. What DALL-E allows you to do is to put in text and get back images. So the question is, how do they come up with DALL-E? Well, DALL-E is actually a combination of the artist Salvador Dali and the Pixar character Wall-E. It reflects the model's ability to generate surreal and imaginative images like those created by Dali, as well as the capacity to understand and interpret textual prompts similar to Wall-E's intelligence. Now, unlike traditional image generation models, that rely on pre-existing images as references, DALL-E has the ability to generate completely new images from scratch based on your textual descriptions. It can generate objects, animals, scenes, or even abstract concepts that have never been seen before. And to train DALL-E, OpenAI used a data set consisting of text-image pairs, where the model learned to associate textual descriptions with corresponding images. And the extensive training allowed DALL-E to learn the underlying patterns and features necessary to generate coherent and visually appealing images based on textual prompts. DALL-E has demonstrated impressive capabilities in generating unique and creative images, showcasing its potential in various applications such as art, design, advertising, and visual storytelling. But it's important to note that with ChatGPT, DALL-E is a research model, and it's available in kind of a research mode or in a beta mode. Now, people are continuing to develop apps based on ChatGPT and DALL-E, and they're looking to monetize. What we're going to show you today are tools that are available to you free of charge, that you can go out, experiment with, and take a look at. So with that, let me go ahead and go into a demo of DALL-E. And organization that I'm using is Microsoft. Microsoft has created an image creator, and I like it better than the one provided by OpenAI, simply because it's very intuitive. It's very visual appealing, as you can see, and it's very quick in coming up with its images. So just like ChatGPT, I can put in whatever I want. Now, if I put in something like, say, a deck, and I ask it to come back with a deck, that's not really giving it a whole lot of information. So it's not going to really give me back a whole lot of information as a result. So it'll say, well, you know, what kind of deck are you looking for? So if I go back to it and I say, you know, create a white deck next to a yellow colonial house with green shutters. That gives it a lot more information to work with. And so it's going to go out, it's going to search its database. And instead of delivering back images, I mean, Google can deliver images to you. You can put in a description and it'll show you images, but those images were created by other people. This is images that, based on the information that I have put in, is coming back with images that, in a sense, I've created because I put the information into the tool. So now you can see it's got the white deck, it's got the colonial house, it's got the yellow paint, and it's got the green shutters. So if you're in you know, contracting and construction, architect, you can see anything that's highly visual. You can put things in, and you can take concepts and begin to show them to your clients out there, and it becomes much more powerful than perhaps saying, well, let's just look through a bunch of different pictures and you tell me which one best fits your needs. Now you can take the customer's needs, and again, the more detailed, the better, and you can create and give back to them images that show them what you can do to create it. So it becomes just very collaborative as a result. So with that, that was a quick demo. I'm going to head back. We'll head back to the slide deck.
All right.
We'll talk a little bit about some of the use cases and some of the prompts as it relates to DALL-E.
How's that?
That's great. Can we go on to the next slide?
All right.
Okay, so when you look at the use cases related to DALL-E, it's going to be those types of things that are highly visual. You know, probably its greatest impact right now is in the area of graphic design. You could be, you know, creating a company and you want to come up with a logo. You can put in, you know, different information into the tool, and it'll come back with concepts. It'll give you images of what your logo could look like. The same is true for products. You could put in the product design and prototyping, and you can describe, you know, the vision in words. It'll generate a corresponding visual representation. It's good for storytelling and illustration. If you're a writer, an author, or a storyteller, it enhances your narratives with custom illustrations and visual representations. It can give you, you know, virtual environments. If you're, you know, developing gaming and you're in the gaming industry, you can create virtual environments for that. You can do data visualization in the area of complex data sets. And where I think this has probably its greatest impact is in the area of financial information. If you are a CFO somewhere, a financial person, you can take the complex data from that spreadsheet, put it into the tool, and it will come back with a visually understandable representation. And it's good for accessibility and visual aid. People that you know, have a need to interact with visuals versus text, you can do that very easily through the tool. Oh, we go on to the next slide. So we talked about prompts. You know, what prompts is, information to prompt the tool to do something, to come back and give you information. So as we've been saying all along, the more descriptive you can be, the more information and better information the tools are going to give back to you. And it's, things like, what kind of style do you want? We talked about the colonial. I want a colonial style. We talked about colors. I want a yellow house with green shutters and I want a white deck. You can use, comparative language. I want it bigger than, smaller than, not like. You can experiment with perspective and angles. Again, if you're in engineering or architecture, you can put in very specific data and get very specific information back. You can consider emotions and actions. You can give it, very descriptive information. You could say, I want a picture of a corgi jumping through a red hoop in the rain. And it'll come back and it'll give you images of that. You can combine objects with concepts, provide constraints or limitations. And the main thing as you go along is to iterate, and refine. The more that you refine your prompts, the better the tool is going to do in providing you with information that you're ultimately going to find helpful and your clients are going to love. So with that, I think we're off to frequently asked questions.
You bet. So we've tried to anticipate some of the questions you'll ask, and then we're going to go to the chat room, and Georgianne is going to specifically go through some of the questions that came up. But these are some of the things we often hear. First of all, where is artificial intelligence or AI? And the answer is now it's everywhere, right? It's in your Apple Watch. It's in social media, advertising. They're using it for medical diagnosis. Recruiting apps do use it a lot. But much of it is embedded, so-called behind the firewall, right? As I said, sort of Wizard of Oz style, right back there where you can't see who's pulling the levers. Well, it's the same thing with AI itself, so it's not so obvious. So why did it sort of suddenly appear and get so much popularity and talk about it in the last year, 6 months or so? And that's because now, as you saw from Rob and I, it's not just behind the firewall. You can actually we actually have dedicated apps that you can knowingly and directly interact with the AI to help you do a task. So what is behind that curtain? Well, it's huge amounts of data and computing power. Think of Google times 10, right? And it's also technology that's moving forward very, very rapidly. ChatGPT 3.0 came out late last year. They've already introduced 3.5 and 4.0 is also available as well. What I want to make sure we leave you with, though, is that the fact that it's a very powerful tool does not mean it has to be difficult for you, right? If you want to fly to Pittsburgh, you don't need to be an aeronautical engineer. You don't need to understand how that plane works. You just need to be able to make a reservation and get on the plane when they call your number, right? And that's the same thing here. We want to demystify AI for our audience. Is it catching on? You bet. ChatGPT alone has reached more than 100 million users in less than 12 months. Faster adoption than any other similar kind of app in history. Faster than social media, faster than the internet, etc. A question we get asked is plagiarism or copyright a problem? So it is a custom response, okay? But if you are concerned about that, use the sourcing prompt that I talked about earlier, and that will tell you where it got the information, and you can go back and check and make sure that you know, there isn't something that you would consider to be a problem. And then finally, what about medical, legal, and financial use cases? Because these are, you know, more regulated industries. You have to be a lot more careful here. And I would, you know, then say writing a job description or a blog, right? So to be very clear, neither Rob or I are in any of these fields, but we do believe it's okay to be used as a research tool only. If you're still concerned about that, I would check with your, you know, the people in your field to see what they see as the limitations. Remember, we've said over and over again, you want to fact check the results. So Rob's going to tell you about where to go with to get some of these tools.
Okay, great. Well, we talked about ChatGPT. Jeff showed you a demonstration of that. The URL, if you want to go out and experiment and use it on your own, it's chat.openai.com. You can sign up for the free version, and then if you want to, you can upgrade to a premium version, or you could just stay within the free version. Google also has come out with its own version of AI tools that's similar to ChatGPT, although they use a different methodology than ChatGPT. But their tool is called Bard, and you can go to bard.google.com and you can sign up for theirs. Bing uses the ChatGPT open source code, and they've come out with a tool. And it's at bing.com/new. And that's all three of those tools give you the ability to put in text and get information back from the tool. So, you know, people have looked at different ones and they become familiar with them, and they say, you know, I really like this tool the best, and they kind of stay with that tool. But all are free, all for free versions. So feel free to check them out. And one thing that Bing offers to those who are Microsoft Edge browser users is they will embed an icon in the browser, so that you can go directly to their chat while you're within your Microsoft Internet browser. That's a nice feature. As far as image creation, we showed you the Bing image creator, and that's at bing.com/create. OpenAI also has its version of an image creator. It's a little more stripped down than Microsoft is, but it's still very adequate for use. That's at openai.com/DAL-E-2. So you can go out and use theirs. And the thing about this whole phenomenon is that right now there is just a tremendous amount of development going on. A lot of people are developing tools around the open source of ChatGPT and DALL-E, and they're looking to monetize. They're looking to roll out their tools, get adoption, and then have people start charging people for their tools. So there's a tool out there called AI Writer. It's not only a text generator, but it's got an artificial intelligence copywriting assistant, and that's at simplified.com. For those that are concerned about, you know, copyright issues, it can help you with that. There's a program out there called Slides AI, where you can put text in and the tool will generate PowerPoint slides for you that you can then use to present to other people. So I don't even have to go through the process of copy pasting. I put my information in and it comes back with slides that I can go ahead and use. And there's a plethora of mobile apps that are out there from people that, again, are using ChatGPT and DALL-E as a foundation. You're just going to see, as we move forward, more and more companies out there developing and trying to get mind share of clients that are out there. But, you know, the biggest that are out there right now is OpenAI, Google, and Bing. You know, they are the biggest of the big right now in this space. But you can expect others like Apple to come out with things similar as well.
So couple of quick next steps that we'll also pass along. I mean, those were the next steps, of course, to, get started with AI, but we'll offer a few more, two more suggestions. And that is on July 20th, SCORE Boston is going to have a web seminar featuring actual SCORE clients using AI tools. So these are clients of ours when we do mentoring who are out there actually using AI. We know quite a few of them. These are clients who have said that they'd be happy to show the audience how they're using it. And that'll be on July 20th. And then, of course, with SCORE, we do free and confidential mentoring. If you're in the Boston area, you can go to the link we see there, and then on Rhode Island, you can see the Rhode Island link, and we would be happy to help you with any of your business needs, marketing, finance, sales, HR, and AI. So, Georgianne, if you want to join back in, looks like you've had quite a few people reach out to you. You want to give us some questions here to round out the rest of the discussion?
I sure can. A lot are repetitive, but the first one that I thought was interesting is, will you get the same answer if you run the same request at different times?
I'm not sure. Okay. So, because we're all learning this, but I have done something like that and generally get very similar answer, not always exactly the same, but I have run it repetitively and I got a very similar answer. I will say that changing just one word, like for instance, when I first did that blog that you saw at the beginning, I said that I had, when I did the names, I said I was having a website, and then I changed it to shop, and that right away generated a different response. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that?
Excuse me. My only thought is that if you put the same prompt in OpenAI, and then turn around and do the same thing to Bing, turn around and do the same thing to Bard and Google, you will get 3 different perspectives on your particular prompt.
Good point. Georgianne?
Okay. A lot of questions about the copyright issue, which you've addressed somewhat, but there still seems to be a bit of confusion. I don't know what else you can say at this point, but can you just give another sentence or two about using
so
created
again,
as your own?
First of all, obviously there are certain things that you don't need to worry about copyright because you're not promoting something as your own individual work. If you are in that situation, again, I recommend using the source prompt that I told you, so you can go back and look and make sure that even though you're getting a custom built custom built message, that in fact it doesn't appear as if it is doing anything that incorrect from a copyright standpoint. So that would be my recommendation if that is a concern.
Okay, there was also a question about the sourcing prompt and how that's actually in the tool, or is that in the browser?
It is. You have to go to the browser and then access the tool through the browser, and then you can use that prompt. You will not be able to use that like on Bard or Bing, you can do it, but on ChatGPT, because it does not have a browser, right? It does not have the ability to tell you currently, by the way, 3 months from now, this could all change, right?
Right.
But currently it does not because it does not have a browser, it can't tell you what the source URLs are.
Okay. Someone asked about, Rob, you're using Microsoft. I have a Chromebook that uses Google and the cloud. Will DALL-E work with Google Office Suite? Again, it's
Absolutely.
not a browser, but go ahead.
You're probably using the Chrome browser. And all you need to do is to go to bing.com/new, sign up, and you can use the tool. You don't have to be in a Microsoft browser.
Okay. And is Apple coming out with an AI bot?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, they use AI for a bunch of stuff, but I don't know what their plans are.
Yeah, I mean, you could bet they're going to come out with something just to keep pace with Google and Microsoft.
Right.
And you know, they've got the Safari browser that's out there, and it's not widely used, but yeah, I'm sure they're getting comments coming back from their clientele as to where are they going to play in this space.
And let me just add, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong on this. A lot of these tools, right, whether they're, you know, from Microsoft or whether they're third-party tools, kind of as you alluded to earlier, they are not reinventing an AI app that converts, you know, that generates text, right? They are using ChatGPT behind the scenes, and then they are adding their own capability to that. So somebody like Apple, you know, I don't know how far along they are in creating their own engine, but they could just as easily just adapt ChatGPT and then incorporate it into their offering. Does that sound about right, Rob?
Yeah, and you know, I think you know, funny note is that Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, says he uses ChatGPT. So, but you know that they're going to be developing something to play in this space.
Okay. Can AI help develop a web page?
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about that as one use case, is to create text. Now, I was talking about from a text standpoint. And of course, Rob was talking about it from a standpoint of you know, creating images. So most web pages are nothing more than, are in fact just that, text and images, right? So there you have your two main components. Now, if you wanted to actually have it create the package, create the page itself, I don't personally, I'm not aware that. I'd say that's a little bit outside the scope of what we've tried to tackle today. But I would do a search and see if that's something you wanted to do. In other words, if you wanted to go beyond actually having it create the text and the images for you, and you wanted to actually create the web page itself, I think maybe do a search and see if there's an app for doing that. I don't think that, just to be clear, that does not exist in ChatGPT or DALL-E, right? But it may exist in a third-party app. As Rob said, there's a lot of them out there using these technologies, and there could be one that exists like that.
Okay, I have two related questions. I prefer that AI only edit my essay and not write it for me. Is there an AI for that?
You know, again, and unfortunately, I think, Rob, you know, pipe up if you have any input. There is so much out there, and it's happening so fast that I'm reluctant to say yes or no. Again, if you'll notice, what we've done is we've deliberately narrowed this discussion for this seminar to ChatGPT and to DALL-E, or you know, the derivatives of DALL-E for image. So, and the answer is no, you can't do that in ChatGPT. If there's an app out there to do it, I'm not aware of it, but it's possible.
Well, and a couple of people mentioned Grammarly. to do
Yeah,
the editing.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's a tool I use. To be honest, I don't know how much AI there is in Grammarly, but yeah, that's a very, okay, so it's almost like the second question answered the first question, right?
Right.
So there is a great tool, I use it, so I know it very well, called Grammarly. You take your text, you drop it into Grammarly, and it will edit the text for you, both from a not just spell checking, but grammar checking and clarity, tone, a whole bunch of different ways. And there's like many of these programs, there's a free version and then there's a premium version. The free will get you a certain amount of capability, and then the premium will get you more. But yes, I can tell you from personal experience, thank you for that question, that I have found that to be a very good tool. I like it a lot.
Okay, and related, can I use my photos as a prompt to DALL-E?
Yeah,
That's
you
for
can
you, Rob.
upload photos into DALL-E and do searches on them, and you can edit your photos.
Okay, you can edit your photos, but you can use your photos as a base to
Yes.
create. Okay. Okay. And someone asked about Chat GPT. Is there a huge difference between the free and paid version?
So the main difference, as I understand it, is first of all, is there can be a speed issue. So for instance, you saw how quickly that came up. Well, I used for this seminar, I've always used the free version, but I wanted to make sure it came up very quickly. So I purchased the, for $20 a month, I got the premium version for today, right? It's for a whole month, but to use today. And if you're just going to use it, say on a Sunday afternoon, you'll get almost instant response, right? But there are 100 million plus users out there. If you hit a busy time, you may be sitting there for a minute or two waiting for a response with the basic version. But it's not, even using the basic version, I never waited more than 60 minutes, 60 seconds to maybe a little bit more. The other benefit is that the premium version uses either 3.5 or 4, the more recent versions, which are first of all, supposedly more powerful. In other words, they'll supposedly give you a better response. An example would be that they say ChatGPT 3.0 took the bar exam and only got a certain grade, and 3.5 got a better grade, and 4.0 got an even better grade, right? So, it's like a more intelligent, more capable app. And then the other thing is that supposedly the more recent versions also use fresher information. In other words, 3.0 might be using data that is, say, a year old or something like that, whereas the newer versions, because they were developed more recently, they may have dumped more and more information in there that it wasn't available, say a year ago. We have just time for maybe one more question, or Rob, if you have one more comment. Otherwise, I think we should wrap up.
Okay. A couple of times people have asked, can it produce architectural drawings?
What do you think, Rob?
You can create concepts. If you wanted to create, right down to the specs, to the specifications, it's not that sophisticated. But what it can do within the architectural arena is take your ideas and then render concepts to you that you can then turn around and say, okay, now what is the architectural specification now that we've decided what we're going to focus on.
And one last question, can DALL-E produce video?
That is a really great question. And I was experimenting with that myself, and right now I don't think it does, but stay tuned as things continue to develop, and there may actually be an app out there that does create videos for you. There'll probably be animations. I mean, they're not going to create live people and stuff. There'll be animations, but there may actually be an app out there that does that I'm just not aware of. But it's a great question.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you both enjoyed this. I hope this allows those who have not used AI to be more comfortable with it, and those who have used it to maybe pick up a few extra tips. Thanks, Rob and Georgianne, and to the Boston chapter, and of course, the Rhode Island chapter of SCORE. And we'll see you on July 20th at the next AI seminar that I mentioned earlier. There'll be invitations going out, and if you received an invitation to this seminar, you will receive an invitation to that seminar as well. And if not, we'll have a great summer. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.